whose bodies fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, but to those who were disobedient? So we see that they were unable to enter because of unbelief. He goes back to Psalm 95, verses 7 and 8, and he's going, please listen to God's voice. Please listen to God's voice. God is calling you. Now, I may lose it here, but I just want you guys to know this is how beautiful and wonderful God is. When we wander, he calls us. Even when we wander, he still pursues us. For 40 years, God called and pleaded with Israel to return to him. 40 years. So when I talk about the danger of a hardened heart, for 40 years God chased after his people and they still rebelled. I mean, God is pleading with them to return. The author is pleading with them to hear God's voice. And let me just, I know I'm going on way too long today, but let me just talk about God's voice and what it means to us. We have all, like I said, we've all met one-on-one. We've talked about it, talked about things, and one of the things I know we always discuss is people will say, I have this big decision to make. I always have a big decision to make. And this is my reason, this is my reason, this is my reason, this is my reason. But something's always missing, and I always have to bring it up. I always say, hey, that's all wonderful and great. Where's Jesus in your choice? I don't care what it is. A new job, moving to a different city, dating someone, I want to get into a relationship with this person, that. The first question has to be, where is Jesus in this? Because we need to be still and hear God's voice. We need to hear his voice. God is pursuing us. God is after us. He's desiring us to have a greater relationship with him. And we leave him out of every decision we make. I don't care what it is. Is it school? Is it a new job? Is it dating someone? Is it a promotion? Whatever it is, do we ask, where is God in this decision? You know what I'm going to do before I make a decision? I'm just going to pray and wait to hear from God. We don't do that. We leave God completely out of it. And the author's telling us, listen to God's voice. God's calling after us, please, please follow me. Please hear me. Because if we don't seek after God's voice, if we don't wait to hear from him, we wander. And when we wander, our hearts are hardened. And when our hearts are hardened, we don't enter into his rest. So let's kind of start wrapping this thing up. One of the amazing things out of this passage that we've learned is that we can prevent wandering. We can prevent a hardened heart. We can even prevent the deceitfulness of sin if we just meet with one another, if we encourage one another, if we exhort one another, if we're in real community. We can beat this. God's provided for us, and he says, you guys have to be in community. You can't live life independently. You just can't do it. You're going to wander if you do. But there's another way. There's another thing that we can do. We see that in verse 19, verse 18 and 19. Believing and obeying. So, we need community, and we need to believe and obey. Now, if you look at the verses, you're probably wondering, where does it say believe and obey? But it says, and whom did he not swear that they would not enter his rest, but to those who were disobedient. So we see that they were unable to enter because of unbelief. Do you want to enter his rest? Be obedient. Do you want to know how to, let me reverse this, how to be able to enter? It's belief. Now we often think belief and obedience are far apart. Because again, it's that idea of that legalism, that you're telling me to do this, you're telling me to do this, you're telling me to do this. I'm not telling you to do anything. Scripture tells you to do it. Scripture says, do this. Do you want to be part of God's house? And we talked about this last week. That's a conditional statement. Do you want to be part of God's house? You can't waver in your faith. Do you want to be in his rest? Well, be obedient. Follow what God commands you to do. It's very simple. And we see, if we look back at the example of the Israelites, who was disobedient? The Israelites. Who was obedient? Joshua and Caleb. Who didn't make it into the promised land? About some 600,000 Israelites. Who made it into the promised land? They were obedient. It was simple. Excuse me. God said, do this, follow me. And they did it. The others, do this, follow me. They refused. They rebelled. And so, those concepts, believe it or not, actually go hand in hand. Obedience and belief. I cannot believe unless I am obedient, and I cannot be obedient unless I believe. It's not you have to do this, you have to earn this, but God's saying, it's very simple. God says, do you want to be saved? Well, everyone's like, yes, I do. Well, how do you get saved? Believe in Jesus Christ, that he died for you. His life, death, resurrection was for your account, spared you from God's wrath. So, to believe, I have to be obedient. And I can't be obedient unless I believe. Do you see how those two concepts go hand in hand? And we think they're at opposite ends of the spectrum. Because we think, when we hear obedience, we think that means rules, that means I have to do this, I have to earn it, I have to do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it's not. God's saying, do this because you believe. And believe because you do these things. It's a wonderful thing that works together. And when you look at it, like I said, these concepts go hand in hand. They're virtually one of the same thing. So let's kind of wrap this up. Again, I don't want you guys to come away from this thinking that I'm angry and you have to do this. What I'm trying to get across is, do you see the importance, the significance of community? Do you see how vital it is, our fellowship with one another, what it does? One of the big myths, one of the great myths of reading our Bibles, and I've talked to you guys about this, if you read Scripture in the original Greek, one of the wonderful things about the Greek is that if a word is a singular or a plural, it's very easily identifiable. You don't even have to be smart, to be honest. You just have to know this word ends with this letter, that means plural. This word does not plural. Simple. In English, we don't have that advantage. So we hear things like, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Great verse, I love it. Except that's a plural you. But we all think that's singular. We all think that means you stand in the mirror every day and you go, Hugh, you work out your salvation with fear and trembling. But instead it's, church, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. And I cannot stress how much we miss out because of the culture we're raised in, because of the part of the world we live in. We often think in America, man, we've got it great. We've got all these good things. Man, got a job, I make like $50,000 a year, I got a car, I got all those things. You know what we don't have here? Community. We live individual, materialistic lives. And Scripture is all about community. And it's funny, we think that they don't have, and by I mean they, other parts of the world, they don't have what we have. And we're so backwards in our thinking. We have no clue. If any of you guys have done a mission trip overseas, you know exactly. If you're from a different country or you were raised in a different culture, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You don't make choices based on you. You make choices based on you. And that's what Scripture's telling us is, you know what? We're not islands. We're not independent on our own. We need one another. We desperately need one another. The church is never you. It's all of you. It's all of us. We can't function properly if we're not all engaged. That's where you know, where the author is talking about this concept again of, are there people in the church that are not saved? So I'm not saying that there's people walking along and then all of a sudden they lose their salvation. I'm saying that there's people walking along who think they're saved and have never been saved. And we know that the only way salvation occurs is through belief in Jesus Christ. What he did for us. Jesus Christ became a man, lowered himself from his place in heaven, seated at the right hand of God, down to earth, became a man, lived a perfect life, endured suffering, humiliation, temptation beyond comprehension, and because he did that perfectly, he took God's wrath from us. So that God says, I want you to be part of this family. You have to believe. I want you to be obedient and believe. And then that's it. That's all it takes. But it happens in community. It happens in a group. It doesn't happen individually. My faith is not my faith. It's our faith that God gave us. Because otherwise, what do I need to come to church for? I just go hang out someplace by myself. Sing a couple songs. Read a little Bible. All by myself. And then just hope and pray that I don't wander and my heart doesn't become hardened. I say that the alternative, I say this all the time when I'm witnessing to people, but and I'm going to use this to you guys, is if I'm wrong about my understanding of community and what it means to be in fellowship and the importance of us being together, I'm okay with it. I really am. If I'm standing before God and he goes, Q, you got this all wrong. I wanted you guys to be all individuals, individualistic, not concerned about it. I'm okay with that. I don't want it to be the other way around where God goes, this whole time you talked about you and one person, only you and all. That I don't want to be. And so, like I said, if I'm wrong about the community thing, I'm fine with dealing with the consequences of that. I don't think I am. And then, again, now we're talking about community and we're going to transition into the table. Where the culmination of why we get together and worship and serve kind of finally takes place. When we, as a group of believers, come together in unity, one accord, one mind, and come to the table and celebrate the life, death, and resurrection of Christ.